And we can get started. It's 7 o'clock, so we're going to continue our radio project for the day, or for I guess the month. This is kind of our project of the month, continuing from last month into November, but that's okay. So this is where we're at in our radio project so far. We've got our speaker drawn, we've got our kind of enclosure, and the part that we're going to draw today is a little holder that holds the battery. So I'm envisioning a M12, a Milwaukee Tool M12 battery powering this thing. I think they're super useful. In fact, let me grab my little battery holder, because they make these tiny little, these things. And this is basically just a holder that you could stick an M12 battery in, and then I 3D printed this that'll change this weird shape change a triangle into a round hole. So you can fit a triangle into a round hole depending on the size of the triangle. And I'm going to show you how to draw a weird shape like this. We're basically going to trace it, but I'll show you how that's done. So we're going to draw this little battery holder, and then hopefully we'll be able to get this little part modeled today too. So that's our goal for class today, is to get this weird shape drawn. And I got my calipers so we can do some measurements, and let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing that I'm going to have you do is I am going to share a file with you. This here is a picture of the top of that battery holder. And you can see why I like them so much. There's a little 12-volt outlet, and there's a USB 5-volt. It only gives you like a half an amp, so it's not a whole lot for much. So I end up using this DC jack for a lot of stuff. But I'm going to share this with you, and I'm going to do that by sharing it in the chat. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to pop over to our chat here, and I'm going to just share it in the chat with people who are with us live. And Mike, you can let me know if you got that. Did you see how to open up the chat window?
I'm heading in that direction right now.
Cool.
Is that Google Chat?
Well, it's in the chat for the meeting. So when you're looking at the Google Meeting web page, in the bottom right-hand corner, there's like 5 icons, and one of them is a chat with everyone. And I'll just share this.
I do not have it. I think you got deleted. Let me jump into my deleted items real quick. Carl Stevens. Invite there. Meet Google. Blah blah blah.
While Mike finds that, for people who are watching this on YouTube, we do this live at the Milwaukee Makerspace. I send out an email invite from this email address, and I'm going to do that thing you're never supposed to do on the internet, which is share your email address. So there's my email address right there, and if people want to get invited to join this class live, just send me an email and I will invite you, and you can ask questions and I will answer them. Hello. Do we get? How you doing, Mike?
Not too bad.
We got two mics. We're double mic'd.
Yes. Mike and Ike.
Mike and Mike. So I shared in the chat a photo that we're going to be using in today's class. So if you look in the chat of your Google Meet, you'll see a link to the photo. And Mr. Tarnowski, you were?
Help, Chief.
No? All right, let me come over and take a look. So maybe like info? You're there? I'm allowed to share the screen.
And I told it that I gave it permission for,
Let's do the join.
check your audio and video.
Maybe.
Camera permission needed, okay.
I'm closing that. It looks like you haven't joined the chat. Or it looks like you haven't joined the meeting, but you've joined the meeting. What's this right here?
Intra-coder link. Okay, let's close that out. That's calendar, okay. Let's go back here to the original Google Meet.
It's funny because I still have you as being in the meeting. Oh, there you go. Try join now.
Okay.
There we go. There we go. There we go. So now we've got a chat thing right down there. It's there next to it.
Okay.
Gosh, it doesn't show you the chat, huh?
Nope.
So, virtual mic, can you see the chat?
Give me 1 second. I'm on my phone.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's a thing.
Yes, I can see your chat.
You can see that link I just posted in it?
Yes,
It
sir.
just popped up.
Oh, just popped up. You got it now, Mike? Both mics? Mike and Mike?
Yes, sir.
So that is the photo that you will need for today's class. So put it somewhere where you remember where it is, on your desktop or in your downloads folder or wherever you're going to stick it.
You want it saved as an HTML file or?
You'll want to save it as like an image.
Okay, because it's not giving me an option there. Okay, never mind, I'll right click.
You got it? There you go. Yeah, right click and save as. So this is our photo, and I just have to right click on it and say save link as. Oh, nope, not save link as. What if I click this thing here? Download all? Is that what I want to do? Yeah, download all. So there's the little 3 buttons, the little hamburger, not hamburger menu, 3-dot menu up in the, when you're looking at the Google Photos there. So, when you're,
Okay,
yeah, when you click on
I
that link there,
opened it in a separate link,
and then if you click on
and then I did save image
Oh,
as
that'll work.
blah
Yeah.
blah blah
That'll
dot
work.
JPG.
That'll work, that'll work. All right, cool. So we got our image. Now, let me show you how to use it. So I'm going to go ahead and start a new document here, a new design. And in our new design, we can just start by attaching that canvas. So in the Insert menu, I'm going to go ahead and choose this Canvas option. Gosh, I hope I have my calipers with me today. Sure do. So I'm going to go ahead and choose this Canvas option here. And now I'm going to navigate. I'm going to say insert from my computer. And I'm going to navigate to wherever I saved that picture. So for me, it's on my desktop. But for you guys, it'll be wherever you saved that picture. And then I'm going to say open. And now I've got a window. This is my canvas window. So it's got my image says it's that location that I just chose. And I also have to select the face that I'm going to put that on. So this is like when you're creating a sketch, you have to choose a two-dimensional surface to put that sketch on. And I'm going to choose the top for this. So I'm going to kind of rotate so I can make sure I see this top plane a little bit easier. And then I'll choose that as the face that I'm putting that canvas on. And once I choose that as a face, I can see my image. It's real small, but I can see it. I could use these arrows to move it around if I want to. I can also scale that image. And I am going to choose to do that. So one of these little icons in this little widget is kind of in the corner. I guess it's a little curvy shape here. And if I click and drag on that, I'm just going to drag it up. And I don't need to enter a specific value here. We're going to make sure to calibrate that image in the next step. I just want to scale it up so I can see it. So it becomes visible to me on the screen here. So right now this value is like 4.65. I can type in 5 right there. That'd be fine. I just want to be able to see this image clearly. At its original scale, it's real tiny, and I don't want to spend time zooming in, so I'm just going to scale it up so I can see it better. And once I can see it, it's worth noting, I can mess with the opacity of this image. So if I want it to be real faint, I can do that. If I want it to be full strength, I can do that as well. Somewhere around 50 I feel like works out pretty good. Usually when I use this feature, it's because I'm about to do what I'm going to do with it, which is trace on top of it. And then once I'm done with it, I just kind of hide this canvas layer. So the opacity doesn't really matter a whole lot, but if you want to be able to see through it to your drawing, just note that you can have an opacity here. And now I'm just going to say OK. So I've got a canvases folder that's popped up in my browser, and I can click on the little triangle and view the contents of that canvases folder. And you can see I've got my image name. Whatever your file name was when you saved that picture, it will be the same name here. I think you can change this. However, maybe it's best to leave it as whatever the file name is. I'll let you do your own thing there. So the key here is we want to make this image accurate to real life. IRL, as they say, in real life. So we do that by right-clicking on the image that we just imported in the Canvases folder. So over in my browser here, I've got my Canvases folder open, and I can hover over the image in my Canvases folder, and I can right-click on it, and then I can choose this Calibrate option. So by choosing Calibrate, now it gives me this little crosshair, and if I stop moving my mouse, it says pick the first point on the canvas plane. So I'm going to come up here to my navigation cube and click on the top. So I'm just looking straight down at this thing, and I'm going to zoom way in here and get a real close-up view. And the first point I'm going to click on is, I'm going to try to get as accurate as I can to the far edge of one side. So I'm imagining this line here as being a dividing line between the two halves, and I'm going to click on as close as I can to the edge of that to the edge of one side there. And now I'm going to move my mouse over. It's not a click and drag, it's a click and move. And I'm going to specify the edge of the opposite side. And now I get a distance measurement that pops up there. And this is where the calibration happens. So if I grab my calipers and I measure this particular battery holder here, I measure it at 2.075. So I'm going to enter that in, 2.075. And I'm going to hit enter, and it's going to scale that up. So, you know, for me it didn't scale it up a whole lot, but now we have an accurately scaled image. So this image is true to life scale, to actual scale. It's 1:1. And now we can just trace on top of it. So this is a great technique when you have like a shape like this that's real curvy, and like measuring these curves and these radiuses would be next to impossible. But if we just need to trace on top of it, this is a pretty easy task. So we've got a shape here that is clearly symmetrical. So I'm just going to draw half of it. So I'm going to go ahead and grab from my create menu, I'm going to say create a sketch. I'm going to create that sketch on the same plane that I created that canvas. And I'm going to start by drawing a line. So I'm going to draw a line all the way from basically the same points that I chose to make my calibration. I'm going to draw a line bisecting this. And you can see my drawing is kind of askew. It's not at a perfect 90-degree angle to how I'm going to model this. But that's okay, because I'm going to use this as a mirror line. So I'm just going to draw a line all the way across. Again, trying to get as close to the edge of each of those things as possible. Just kind of bisecting that right in half. And I used kind of the parting line from the mold from this part as a way to make my line. So I made my line kind of right over the top of that parting line from that mold. Now this line is going to be our mirror line. So I guess technically this could be a construction line if you wanted to. Also, I suppose we could make this an official mirror line. That would be totally fine. We could make it a center line. In our line type options in our sketch palette, you could either make this a construction line, or you can make this a center line. We are indeed going to use it to mirror over, so I'm going to go ahead and make mine a center line. And now to make this curve shape around it, I'm going to choose to use the spline tool. So my guess is this is two different radiuses. It might be 3 different radiuses. There's probably one radius here. There's a second radius that's kind of like this area. And then there's a third radius that's kind of this back half. But it's certainly a series of radii. Radii, is that a word? Is that the plural of radiuses? Radii? Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and grab my spline tool. So I'll click on create, and then come down to spline, and I'm going to choose this fit point spline option. And I'm going to start making my spline. So a spline is very similar to like the pen tool in Illustrator. I'm going to click and place the first point of my spline at the end point of my center line here. And I just have to make a series of points all along the edge of this curve, and it will go ahead and make that curve for me. So I'm probably going to do 4 or 5 points. I tend to, when I use this tool to trace over a curve, I tend to use the curve that it's giving me as a way to, as a guide to where I'm going to place my next point. So here, this curve is fitting really nicely, and if I go further down, that curve doesn't fit so nicely anymore. So I kind of use that as a guide in where to place my points here. And here I can go a little bit further. I can go about that far before my curve gets off. And here I can go all the way. So I just need to connect my two endpoints. And then the way that you finish a spline is you got to use the checkbox. So when you're using the line tool, you can hit the escape key and you still have a line. If you hit the escape key when you're using the spline tool, your spline disappears and you get to practice using the spline tool again. So the way you finish your spline tool is there's this little green checkbox that pops up kind of near the last point that you created, and you just have to click on that and it places that spline. Now we can fine-tune this. My spline looks pretty good actually, but I can grab any of these control points and I can kind of tweak my line. I can zoom in and zoom out and click on this little control point, and if I need to tweak these little arms here, I can do so. But my spline looks pretty good. Pretty happy with that. I am, however, going to make two adjustments. So my guess is this curve back here and this curve up here are actually tangent to each other. And the way that we're going to make them tangent to each other before we have the other half of this mirrored over is by adding a constraint to some of these control arms. So these control arms here, I can add constraints to them just like I would add a constraint to a sketch part. Good? We got it? Nope. We'll give you a little bit more time to draw some spline here. So I got my spline going here, and I'll give you some time to draw your splines. How you doing?
My spline keeps trying to take a shortcut on me.
Yeah, you know, after you place your first point, so if you place your first point like somewhere in there, and then when you go to place your second point, that's when you know what, you got the wrong spline.
Huh?
So there are two different kinds of splines. So you want the fit.
You said the
point
control.
spline. No, fit point spline.
Oh, I thought you said control point. Okay.
Yeah, so they work a little bit differently. So you place the first one, and then you can place the second one, and then now you can see your curve going real nicely there. So yeah, we just had a slight issue. So the control point spline works differently. If I choose that control point spline, is it going to let me? The way that I used the fit point spline was kind of by clicking along the curve here. The control point spline works differently. So the control points, I don't follow the curve when I'm using those control points. It's gonna, you can see my curve is becoming completely different. So it's kind of, I don't know how to use this in order to trace something. I suppose I'd have to like place these points, and then I'd have to move these control points after I place them. I suppose that would be a way to do it if you wanted to use the control point spline to do tracing like we're doing here. And I guess this totally works. It's just it's not as intuitive from the start. So I like to use the fit point spline. So that's pretty nice looking spline. And then once again, these control arms that you get, so if I click off of my sketch, they all disappear. But I can click on any individual point, and I can see the control arm for that individual point. Or I can click on the line itself. So instead of clicking on this point, if I click on this whole line, I can see the control points for all the points here. And now I can control, or what we're going to do next, which is assign some constraints to our control point arms. I'm going to call these, there's probably like an official name for what this is, but I don't work for Autodesk and they're not the boss of me, so I call things what I want, because this is America, Jack. Alright, cool. We got a spline?
I have a spline.
Sweet. So, if we choose this control point at either end, so this point at this end here, I want to apply a constraint that's going to make this arm perpendicular to our center line. So if I go ahead and click on my constraints menu and choose this perpendicular option, so it's like the fifth one from the top, so constraints and then perpendicular. Now I can choose that green arm. If I just hover over this green arm, I think it's probably easier if you hover under. Actually, it won't let you pick a curve for a perpendicular constraint, which is nice. So I'm going to choose that green arm, and then I'm going to choose my center line. Oh, and that shifted. That's interesting. So if it shifted your center line, you may just have to move your center line back. So it shoved my center line way down here. So I'm just going to take the other end of my center line and move it back into position. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Although, you know what, I'm kind of curious. So my theory about things in Fusion is it really matters the order at which you click things. So in my past experience, the thing that does the moving is the second thing you click on. So if I click on my center line first and my arm second, nope, still does. Alright, so theory debunked. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and move my other point back into position. The reason that's happening is because this sketch isn't really fully constrained, let's say. Like these things aren't locked in space and position. They really don't have any constraints. It's just a curve. So I'm going to place that same constraint on the other end. So I'm going to go up to my constraints menu. I'm going to choose perpendicular, and then I'm going to pick the arm that's the other side of my spline, and then that center line. And then it's going to go ahead and shift things like I don't want it to again. So I just have to take this endpoint and I could just, oh boy, that's interesting. And really, it's forcing that to be to be perpendicular. So I mean, I drew this before class and worked out just fine. Tell you what, I'm gonna delete that constraint. I'm gonna delete the constraint on one side, and yeah, I'm gonna delete the constraint on one side and just let it be wherever that. Gosh, that's really. Did I delete the wrong constraint? I deleted the wrong constraint. So I deleted my coincident constraint instead of my perpendicular constraint. So now we can move this around. So something that you see here. This is a constraint icon. This is my actual coincident constraint. So this constraint is telling me that this endpoint of this line is coincident with the endpoint of this spline here. This is a perpendicular constraint. So this constraint tells me that these things are perpendicular. And if I ever want to remove a constraint that I've added, or sometimes Fusion gives you constraints as you're drawing, kind of automatically thinks you want to do that. You can always delete them. So if I just highlight that and hit the delete key, it'll delete that constraint. Alright, so now the last thing I got to do here on this sketch is I need to mirror it. So I'm going to go up here to create and then come down to mirror. I'm going to choose my spline that I'm mirroring and my mirror line, which is my center line here. And then I'm going to say oakley dokley. And it looks pretty good. It's not exact. It's kind of coming off the edge here a little bit. But my guess is that's more a factor of my photo and the distortion that's happening with the lens of the camera than it is about the shape. It is probably a symmetrical shape. So now I can say finish sketch. And then hopefully we got a fully complete, we got two halves of a battery holder.
Yep.
Sweet. Alright, cool. So now let's extrude it, because extruding things is fun. And in order to do that, obviously, well, so we have a sketches folder. It would probably be a good idea to, best practice to name this. This is my battery holder end, I'm going to call it. It's the end of my battery holder. Anything is better than sketch 1. So now I can click extrude. So I'm going to go ahead and say extrude. And I'm going to pick both halves of said battery holder. And I'm going to extrude that a distance of, drum roll please, a distance of 3.75. You could tell this part was drawn in America because it's made of freedom units. Alright, so we got our, oh boy, we got our extrusion here, 3 3/4 inches. And I'm going to say OK. Now, we need one more sketch. We need 2 more sketches total, but the next sketch we're going to make is going to be kind of drawing the profile of this. So right now we extruded out like the full height of this entire part. And truth be told, this would be totally sufficient for us to draw the thing we actually need to draw here. However, it'd be fun to make this little cutout, so we're going to make that little cutout. So I'm going to go up to my create menu, and I'm going to choose to create a new sketch. Actually, you know what? Let's not do that. Let's first make a plane. So I want to create this sketch right at the center of my part here, at the parting line on our drawing. And we have a line that represents the center of that part. It's the center line that we drew on our initial sketch. And we can use that line to create a plane. So in order to do that, we'll go ahead and click on the construct menu. And I'm going to choose a plane at an angle. So this plane at an angle tool allows us to use an existing line to create a 2-dimensional surface in which we can draw on at some angle from that line. And it's automatically selecting that line, maybe because it's the only line that I have. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my canvas here because my kind of canvas is kind of getting in the way. I don't need it anymore anyway. So I just turned on the little eyeball on my canvas. And now I can tilt this around here until I get an angle that makes sense to me. And now I can set an angle for this plane. So for me, this angle is going to be 90 degrees. Either negative 90 or positive 90, it's all the same. For you, it might be different. And the key is to just look at the sketch and see if it looks like the plane is cutting your piece in half like this. If your plane is kind of hanging out at the surface, then it's not at the right spot. So your plane like this is not what you want. You want a plane that's cutting your piece right in half, right down the middle, right where that parting line was on our original photo. And now I can say OK. And now on this plane, on that construction plane, now we can create a sketch. So I'm going to click on Create, and then Create Sketch. I'm going to choose this plane that I just created in which to create a sketch on. And now at the top of this, maybe I'm going to go ahead and project that. So it would be helpful to have all of the geometry that already exists projected onto this surface. So we kind of have a rectangle that we kind of need here, and we can use the project tool to take this cylinder and project us some lines. So from the Create menu, I'm going to scroll down to Project Include, and then over to Project. Now, in this case, Project would work just fine, but you could also use this Intersect option, because what we want is this plane is intersecting our body, and we want to create an outline around our plane where our body intersects it. Either Project or Intersect work in this case, but I'm going to choose Intersect because it's one of those rare occasions where that part of the tool comes in real handy. The selection filter that I'm choosing is actually going to be bodies as opposed to specified entities. I'm going to choose to project an entire body. And then I can either click on the body in my drawing view, or I can click on the body, which I totally named Body 1, over my Bodies folder in my browser here. So either one works. I can click on the body in my browser, or I can click on it in my drawing view. And then you can see it highlights blue, tells me I got one selected in my geometry section in my little intersect window here. And then I can say OK. Now you can see I've got purple projected lines here, and those are, yeah.
When we extruded the cylinder thingy, or cylinder-ish.
Yep, totally, yeah.
Was it supposed to be joined or a separate body?
Well, you only got one body, so it doesn't matter. A new body, I don't think you can do a join. I don't think it would have let.
Then I may have done something wrong several steps back.
Oh, yeah. So if you have more than one,
it's a new body now.
Okay, cool. All right. So now we can continue to draw on this, and this is going to be one of those occasions where I just kind of freehand something here, because this is totally extra. So I'm going to draw kind of a basic shape like that. And now if I want to, after the fact, now I can give this some dimension. Again, this is kind of like extra. We don't really need this for our drawing. It's just kind of a fun little extra bit here. So if I wanted to give this sketch some dimension after the fact, I can do that. So this distance that I just measured here, I can add dimensions after the fact to my sketch, and I'll just kind of do that fairly quickly. So in the Create menu, I'll come on down here and say sketch dimension after I've got kind of my freehand lines drawn in. And I can add a dimension between this endpoint and this kind of corner. And if I place that, that's pretty close. 0.42 was my measured dimension here. And you know, this is not exact by any means. I suppose the more exact way to do this would be to take another picture of the side of our object, right? And then trace over this side of this object the same way we traced over the bottom. But we only need the bottom portion of this modeled anyway. The top of this is sticking out of our thing, so it doesn't really matter what shape this is. This is just for funsies, as they say. So I can dimension this line here as being however long it approximately is. 0.59er. It's actually pretty close to. And you know, the other one I'm just going to call good. I'm going to say that that's close enough for government work. And I'm going to just go ahead and say finish sketch. Now, in order to cut that away, we can use our extrude command again. Did I draw that on the right side? Wow. I don't even draw. Oh no, I did. I drew that on the right side. Okay, so now I can go ahead and say create and extrude, and I can choose that little bit up there that is kind of the cutaway for our feature here. And because this plane existed right in the middle of our piece, if I extrude it out, I'm only extruding in one direction right now, so it's only cutting away half of this. Really, what I want to do is, instead of extruding in the direction of one side in my extrude menu, I'm going to extrude symmetrically. And then this is one of those occasions where this is kind of extra here, but I'm specifying a distance right now. Just as a note, you could choose, instead of a extent type of distance, and then specifying a distance and making sure you extrude out past your sidewalls here, you could set a distance type or an extent type of all. And what that'll do is it'll just, the whole shape, just extrude through all that. This is handy if you might change this curve down here. So if you tweak your curve or something like that, if you go back in time, tweak your curve, you won't have to then go and tweak the dimension of this extrusion, because it will always be all. It'll always be the whole part. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and click on OK here. And now we've got a pretty good representation of our battery holder. I've got my side profile that I can name. I've got a body that I can name. This is my battery holder. And the last thing that we need to do here, I'm going to turn off both of my sketches, is to make a part that we can put on our radio. So it's really difficult to drill a triangular hole. It'll be really difficult to drill a hole that is that triangle shape in the top of your radio. So we want to make a little adapter that changes that triangular shape into a circle. And the way that I'm going to do that is just by drawing one at the bottom. So if I spin down to look at the bottom of my little part here of my battery holder, if I click on the Create Sketch icon, and then as the surface that I'm going to create that sketch on, I'm going to choose the bottom of my battery holder. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that as the surface I'm creating my sketch on. And now I can draw a circle So I'll go ahead and click on the Create menu and choose Circle. And then I'm going to choose a center diameter circle. Now, something that's kind of important here and that I'll mention is, like, normally I would say, hey, maybe you should draw your circle starting from your origin. That will actually hurt us, because if we draw our center point starting at our origin, it'll be impossible for us to move our circle around. So I'm going to start my circle purposefully so it definitely does not touch my origin point, so we don't have that built-in constraint of our origin there. And you'll want to make this whatever size you're going to drill the hole in the outside of your radio. So that being said, you'll need a hole saw that is the specific size of this circle. So making it 2.485 inches would not be a good idea, because you probably don't have a 2.4858 inch hole saw. You might have a 2.5 inch hole saw, so that would be a totally acceptable number to use. 2 1/4, that's getting a little tight, so I'm going to do 2.5. And then I'm going to hit enter. And now, like I said, if I had constrained that to the origin, it would be impossible for me to do this, which is to kind of move it around and get it where I want it to live, which seems to be right about there. And now I'm going to draw one more circle. Yeah, I'm going to draw one more circle. Actually, you know what? Instead of doing that, I'm going to offset this existing circle. So I want another circle that's concentric on this circle, just a little bit bigger. So I'm going to choose from the Offset menu. I'm going to come down here. I'm sorry, from the Modify menu. I'm going to come down to this Offset option. It's also the O key on the keyboard. And I'm going to choose that circle as the sketch curve that I'm going to offset. And now I'm going to specify a distance of 1/4 of an inch. So I just need another circle that's just 1/4 of an inch bigger in radius. 1/4 of an inch bigger in radius than our original circle. And I'll go ahead and say OK. And then I can say Finish Sketch. And now,
This come up before. No, the graphics driver, the warning message there.
oh, you got a graphics driver warning?
Oh, I wouldn't worry about it. Just close it.
Oh, okay.
Is it like a little yellow thing at the kind of the top of the window? I've seen that before.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about it. That
Okay.
comes up on all computers that have built-in graphics.
Oh, because I didn't have it before, but.
It probably came up when you dismissed it, didn't realize it.
Or sometimes, like,
Maybe it liked the other Dell driver better, maybe.
No, it wouldn't have been a Dell driver, it would have been an Intel driver, but Dell wouldn't have installed the latest Intel driver anyway. I mean, you could try to manually install it, usually what it does is install a decent driver.
All right, no problem.
so now the last steps here is to just extrude. This is the actual part that we're making that we're gonna like print. So I'm gonna go ahead and, oh sorry, you need your power cord, don't you?
Yeah,
I think
I do.
you can just unplug it. I powered it down.
We did.
Yeah, it's powered down.
Thank you.
You just need to, thank you for the
No problem.
adapter. We were playing with Raspberry Pis before class here. And I stole, because whenever you use a Raspberry Pi, you never have the right dongles or the right adapters or the right USB hubs. So you always got to talk to your fellow makers and borrow theirs. All right, so we're going to extrude out each of these little circles here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Create and then Extrude. And I'm going to start with my kind of inner circle here. Now, you'll notice that because I created my sketch on this bottom surface, I didn't have to project those lines on it. That's because this is a flat surface, so it kind of automatically gave me the lines for the outside of this battery holder. So I just have to click on this outer ring. I'm going to do both. Nope, I'm just going to do just the inner ring. And I'm going to extrude that up into my part here. My plywood is a 1/2 inch thick, and it would behoove us to have this be thicker than that. And I'm gonna make it a full inch because I can, because there's plenty of room on this battery for a full inch holder here. And I'm also going to I want to put it in a specific place. So right now this battery holder is sitting way at the bottom here, and I don't want it to extrude to this position. I could always move it to place after the fact, but I can draw it right the first time by just changing my start plane. So normally when you start your extrusion, you start it from the profile plane. So I'm starting to extrude from the position where my sketch exists in 3-dimensional space. Instead of that, I'm going to extrude from an offset of a specific amount. So, gosh, and for some reason this number needs to be negative. Negative numbers always confuse me in Fusion. But again, for me, this number needs to be negative in order to go up. I guess my distance is negative too. For you, these might be positive numbers, but just know you want it to appear somewhere in the middle of your battery here. And in fact, even further up would probably be better, because our battery is going to sit nice and deep inside of our part and not stick up too far. So 1.5 is good for me. And I don't want to make this a join. This I want to make a new body, because this is a piece we're actually going to have to print or do whatever we're going to need to do to make this. Whereas the battery holder is already designed, we just needed to draw the battery holder in order to make this part. So I'm making a new body, and I can say OK. And now I'm going to do one last extrude. So I'll go ahead and click on Create, and then Extrude again. If I can find my extrude option, sometimes it disappears on me. I'm going to choose that kind of outer ring this time. And then just for fun, just to kind of show off all the different kinds of things you can do in this extrude menu, instead of choosing an offset plane, so that first time we chose extrude, we chose an offset plane, you can also choose an object. So this is kind of handy. So I'm choosing to extrude from the start as an object here, and as the object that I'm going to choose to start my extrusion from, I'm going to choose this top surface of that kind of ring that I made in the last extrusion. And now I'm going to specify a distance there of, this can just be like 1/4 of an inch. In fact, that's probably too much, but a little bit more is better than not at all. Alright, so I'm going to make it 1/4 of an inch. I want to join this to my first extrusion, but I don't want to join it to my battery. So in order to make sure I join this ring to my first extrusion but not my battery, I'm going to turn off my battery holder body in my bodies folder. So if this was on, I'll go ahead and click OK just to show you. Oh, it didn't. Sometimes it does that. It did not. But the way that I make sure I'm only joining the things that I want is by turning off things I don't want to join. And now my join setting here, I can just say OK. And now I've got my separate battery, and this is my battery mount. I'm going to go just a couple minutes over here because I can. And I'm gonna just add a little chamfer to the top here. So in the modify menu, I'm gonna go ahead and choose this chamfer option, and this top ring, I'm just gonna give this a little decorative chamfer, like 1/8 of an inch. You can pick whatever you want. You could make that a fillet if you wanted to. If you were so inclined, if your radio design felt the need to have, instead of a chamfer, to have a fillet up here, I'll let you do whatever you want. You're the boss of you. You make your own decisions. But I like fillets. They make me smile. I'm sorry, chamfers. I like chamfers. They make me smile. Alright. And the last thing that we need to do here is, in order to, so I don't have this in my part, but I want a way to hold this ring onto my battery holder in a better way. And the way that I'm going to do that is with the set screw. So I'm going to add a little set screw hole here. And I'm going to add it to the side because I think that'll be the easiest, frankly. No other reason but that. And the reason it's easy is because I already have a sketch that represents the side of my thing. Can I use that though? If I use that sketch, well, I certainly already have a construction plane that is I got a sketch to name here, that's my mount. I already have a construction plane that cuts this thing in half. So on that construction plane, I'm just going to go ahead and create a sketch on that plane, and I'm just going to draw a circle. And my circle is going to be it's going to be those I've got M3 threaded inserts that I can melt into 3D printed parts. And I believe if I just do 3 millimeters, that's going to be too small. I'm going to make it 3.5 for now. Honestly, I don't remember how big they are. I'm going to have to measure and then change that. But it's probably much more like 4 millimeters actually. So I'm just going to go ahead and create that circle, say finish sketch, and then extrude it out through one of my sides. And Bob is your uncle. So that is our part for today. We've got our battery, and we've got our battery mount. We've got a little set screw hold to hold this in, so when we're removing the battery and putting it back in, this mount will hold the set screw will hold the holder in place, and then this will be like glued in place, I'm imagining. Cool. So that's it. You guys have any questions at home or here in person? I'll walk around after we're done here in class, see how everybody did. Otherwise, next week I think we're going to work on the dial of our radio. And the dial of our radio will include a gear, because gears are fun, and gears are how you make things rotate. So we'll get into gears next week. I'll show you the helical gear, how to install this helical gear plus add-on that I have here. That's a wonderful tool to make all sorts of fun gears. Herringbone gears are my favorite. They're really great for a 3D printer. Not so fun to machine. So use them with caution. Machinists will not be your friend if you give them a bunch of herringbone gears. But I'll show you how to use this helical gear plus to design our dial for our radio. And until then, we'll see you next week.